The Khmer Rouge regime came to power through the intellectuals of the country who wanted a drastic change. In this video, I will be interviewing two journalists living in the same time period as the Khmer Rouge regime. One is from Cambodia, the other is from America. The Cambodian journalist's name is Kong Kea, and the American's is Jeff Barber. The goal of this interview is to show just how cultural influence can change a person's life. How about you introduce yourself for the camera?
My name is Kong Kia, and I am 46 years old, living in New York City.
Where in Cambodia are you from, and when were you born?
I was born in 1967 in the capital Pol Pot, and I lived there with my family for 8 years.
What did your parents do for a living?
My mother didn't have a job. She stayed at home and took care of me and my grandparents who were living with us. But my dad worked very hard, and he started a store that made sandals and shoes.
Would you say you had a good upbringing and a good childhood?
Yes, my parents loved me very much, and we lived in a nice part of the city, Pol Pot. So I would say I was very fortunate.
Now I will be interviewing our American journalist Jeff Barber to get some background information on him. How about you introduce yourself for the camera?
My name is Jeff Barber, and I am 47 years old, and as of now I live in Tampa, Florida.
Where in America are you from, and what year were you born?
I was born in 1966 in Santa Barbara, California, and lived there for 5 years, and then I moved to Los Angeles in '71.
What did your parents do for a living?
My mother had a job for the beginning of my life, for about 5 years I think, but she quit after that to stay home with me, and my dad worked as an architect designing houses, and sometimes he would design things for the city.
Do you think you had a good upbringing and a good childhood?
Yeah, my parents were always there for me and instilled great values with me. We had a nice house and lived in a good neighborhood in LA, so I would definitely say I was lucky, and I was brought up in a good household.
I will now talk to Kong Kea on a more in-depth level to see what life was like throughout the Khmer Rouge regime. What were your initial thoughts as the Khmer Rouge regime became more and more powerful?
Well, I really didn't think much of it, as it originally didn't start military. It was only intellects in the beginning.
When did you really start to get nervous about the Khmer Rouge regime movement?
I started to get nervous in 1975. That's when it really started to get violent. Minorities are being killed, but on top of this, many people were being taken from the capital to work in the countryside.
What happened to your family when it started to get violent?
Well, the first thing that happened was my father's shoe store was taken away from him. They started abolishing all privately owned properties because they were communists. Then, around 1975 of July, they started kicking people out of the capital. Everyone who was considered indifferent to the cause was taken away to the countryside. All we knew and loved was being taken away from us, and I could do nothing at my age.
When they took you out of the capital, where did they take you?
They took us out of the capital and made us walk to the Kampong Cham region, just north of Phnom Penh. The weather and geography there works well for farming rice and paddies.
How hard was the work? Who was watching you, and how were you treated?
The work was incredibly hard. I would work from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. at night, farming and tending to the settlement we had created in the jungle. The Khmer soldiers used a rule called Akna. Ankna was a hierarchy, and even the people not in the regime were in the hierarchy, and we were in the way bottom. But the people watching us were also not that high up on the hierarchy. At first, we were treated like dirt. We were beaten if we were weak. We were beaten if we were strong. After 2 months in this one settlement, we started to get along better with our Khmer overseers. They would even occasionally give us medicine when we were sick. At one point, our settlement got its own doctor.
So are you saying that at those moments, it wasn't that bad for your family and the people in your settlement?
No, not at all. It may sound like that, but in the back of your mind, you knew that these people were not here to guide or help you. They were here because they killed their way to power, and they wouldn't hesitate to kill you if you caused trouble for them. These people were killing millions of their own kind. Not at any moment would I have thought that it wasn't that bad for my family.
Was there ever a thought of escaping into the jungle with your family or just trying to flee the country?
Not a single person in my family thought of this. This was our country, and we were going to stay in our home even if it meant death. We might not have been free, but we were free eventually, and knowing that I didn't give up on my country is the best decision I've made.
What was your reaction when you realized that the regime was ending? Did you believe it?
When I first heard that our people were living in the capital again, and we were resolving our own issues, I cried. It was the happiest day of my entire life. Nothing can compare to how I felt. It had been 5 years of living in the settlement. I had almost thought about not leaving. Then I realized that we needed to get back to our home in Phnom Penh and start our own lives all over again.
What was your reaction when you got into the capital and back to your neighborhood?
It was the best feeling of my entire life. Nothing has even compared. It didn't feel real. I was one of the lucky ones who had my entire family unharmed, and we were able to go back home.
If the Khmer Rouge didn't use force and didn't kill millions, would you have agreed with their ideals?
That's a very hard question because I can't think of a way that our ideals would have worked without them killing their own. If you bring what they believed down to a basic level, which was that we couldn't govern with people who were thought of as kings or queens, and that it is better to have everyone equal with a few people making governmental decisions. Their ideals were so basic communism, nothing more if you really just simplify it. So no, I wouldn't have even agreed with our ideals for two reasons. One, I don't believe in communism, and two, our country was on an upward trend with the economy when we had the government before the Khmer Rouge decided to mess everything up.
How do you think your culture has influenced you into the person you are today?
Because of what happened in my country, throughout my adolescence, it was hard for me to really get a good influence. Since the people in power were evil and were murdering so many, I couldn't find many role models. The one thing I would say is that living in this small community, if anything, taught me how to preserve and to do what is necessary to keep my family alive and well. With this one experience, I think I have learned all the values that I need to shape me into the person I am today. Do I think that going through this hard time was beneficial to the person I am today? No. I do know that because of it, I can appreciate my freedom on a deeper level, and that's all that really matters.
I will now talk to Jeff Barber about what his life was like in America throughout the time of the Khmer Rouge regime. When you were living in LA, what was the worst experience you had with the controlling government?
I never really experienced a controlling government. I mean, of course, there was always things you can and cannot do in the society. There was never really incredible political unrest, and as I was growing up, that affected me in a terrible way. There was the Cold War with Russia, but there was really never direct conflicts, so I can easily say that I never felt oppressed living in LA.
As a kid growing up in LA, what was your biggest worry at the time?
I would say doing something my parents wouldn't want me to do, whether it was breaking curfew, not getting the best grade in school, etc. I really feel that I lived a laid back life.
As a teenager, did you have a job?
I did have a job, and a nice one too. I worked as a caddy for a local golf course in the summer when my schedule worked with school, I'd work as a busboy at a local restaurant. Caddying was hard, but I got paid well and I liked the outdoors. The restaurant was a lot of fun, and the hours weren't bad because I was a student, so I worked from 7 to 10 p.m. Over the summer, as a caddy, I'd work from whatever time the golfers needed me.
Were there any problems that your family experienced throughout your life living with them?
Not that I really can remember. We did okay as a family. My dad worked hard, and from what I could tell, we never seemed to have any financial trouble. I didn't think that there was any trouble with the law either. Overall, my life was pretty average, and I loved it.
How do you think the culture you grew up in has shaped you as a person?
I think it shaped me into a good guy. I worked hard for what I wanted, and I have a lot of values that was taught to me by my father and mother. And I also think that there are expectations that I have to maintain for my family, and there's social conduct that I need to follow that. So I think I was raised in a culture that taught me respect, hard work, and good decisions.
As noted earlier, these two men were born in the same time period, had the same upbringing, and were just all around living lives very similar to one another's. Unlike the American, though, the Cambodian had to go through incredibly hard times while the American had an average life. This just shows How large of a difference cultures can influence a child and his experience.